Al Jazeera podcasts.
Today, the United Nations endorses the plan to stabilize Gaza.
The United States wanted the UN Security Council to endorse Donald Trump's 20-point Gaza ceasefire agreement, and that is exactly what the U.S. got.
But can there be peace if Israel faces no accountability? I'm Natasha del Toro, and this is The Take. Hey everybody, before we continue with today's show, please remember to leave us a comment and let us know what you think about today's episode and what stories you'd like us to do next. Or if you're on the podcast app, let us know where you're listening from, and while you're there, leave us a 5-star review because it helps people find the show.
Ali Harb. I am a journalist for Al Jazeera based here in Washington, D.C.
Ali, it is always such a pleasure to have you here on The Take. We're here today to talk about the United Nations Security Council Resolution 2803, which is generally considered, it's seen as a continuation of the Trump 20-point plan for Gaza.
The Council backed Donald Trump's Gaza ceasefire plan, which includes the creation and deployment of an international stabilization force. The so-called Board of Peace will have sweeping authority over Gaza's governance, its security and reconstruction.
At the highest level, what's in this resolution and what are the main provisions that people need to understand?
So, long story short, this resolution is Trump's plan. This resolution says the Security Council, the United Nations Security Council, endorses and adopts Trump's plan. And that means chiefly international legitimization for the so-called Board of Peace that Trump has proposed to govern Gaza. So it says that a Board of Peace, this international entity that will be chaired by Trump himself, by countries from across the world, will become the de facto government in Gaza, will become sort of the ultimate authority in the Palestinian territory. The second most important element of this resolution is that the Board of Peace will have a force, will have a military policing force known as the International Stabilization Force that will be made up of, troops sent by various countries that, again, answer to this Board of Peace. And then there would be some sort of reconstruction overseen by the Board of Peace, a gradual Israeli withdrawal, but the resolution sort of makes it clear that Israel will hold on to some of Gaza, at least some sort of buffer zone around Gaza, indefinitely or until certain conditions that are very vague are met. But yeah, it basically charts a path forward for Gaza as an internationally governed enclave that would be reconstructed and remain under the stewardship of the so-called Board of Peace until the Palestinian Authority makes some reforms and is able to take over Gaza. But none of this is really spelled out. There are no metrics to follow of when this handover of power would happen. There are no timelines. It basically just internationalizes Gaza for an indefinite period of time.
So you're saying that it is kind of a vague, multi-phase arrangement, is what
Correct.
this plan lays out. Ali, let me ask you a little bit about the politics behind this vote. I mean, noticeably absent here was Russia and China, who they abstained, which feels pretty significant. Why did they sit this one out? Like, what's the calculus there?
Russia's reasoning is that the framework of international law when it comes to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict has been, since not 1948, since the creation of the State of Israel, since 1947, the UN partition plan has been a two-state solution. Mm-hmm. 2 states for 2 peoples, an Arab-Palestinian state and a Jewish-Israeli state. And this resolution is a departure from this framework. This is why Russia sat this one out. The question becomes, why didn't they veto it? Right? Because both countries have veto power. And I think my speculation is that they don't view the Middle East as this strategic priority, and they don't see this conflict as a decisive item on their agenda. So they're like, okay, why upset the United States to wield the power of veto here? Also, there's another geopolitical element here, which is, especially China is in a strategic competition with the United States. And this is Donald Trump's baby. So why would they give him backing to this project that he takes a lot of pride in?
So they abstained for the vote because clearly they don't necessarily agree with it, but they also didn't think that it was worth vetoing it.
Yes.
Now, Ali, one of the main criticisms that I keep hearing about this plan is this sort of huge gap between the resolution's language and the reality on the ground.
Yeah.
Maybe you could lay out some of those disparities for me.
Let's start with the ceasefire itself, right? Because Trump's peace plan, the 20-point so-called peace plan, everything quotation marks, because there's no peace, as we mentioned, in the region or in Gaza. Certainly there isn't peace for the first time in the Middle East in 3,000 years, as the U.S. president claimed.
You're going to have peace, if you think about it, peace in the Middle East for the first time in, they say, really, 3,000 years.
But the first point of Trump's peace plan is the ceasefire, is that the fighting would cease. Dozens of Palestinians have been killed. Israel has been killing Palestinians every single day. There have been airstrikes within the yellow line, the area of control of the Israeli military. There have been demolitions. And within the areas from which Israel has withdrawn, the places that are supposed to be under Palestinian control now, daily airstrikes, right? I don't want to say a number, but it's dozens every week, because possibly by the time this episode's up, the number will have gone up. So the violence has not stopped, certainly not at the level that we've seen before this truce came into effect. It's been curbed a little bit, but Palestinians are being killed. Lebanese people are being killed. Syrians are being killed and kidnapped in southern Syria. So there isn't much of a ceasefire. There's a unilateral ceasefire in that Israel's foes have stopped firing, but Israel has continued to kill and maim and bomb. Second, let's talk about the humanitarian element of this. There's supposed to be a surge of humanitarian aid to Gaza that predates the war. The Gaza government media office, people on the ground are saying there's still shortages of medicine, there's still shortages of food, there's still shortages of basic items. And most importantly, there are shortages of housing, of shelters, of temporary shelters. People are staying in these tents and they're being flooded, which we know this often translates into diseases. And people in Gaza are begging for temporary shelter. That's not getting it. So this is on a very basic level. This resolution, this so-called peace plan is not being put into action. But let's talk about the broader medium and long-term elements. This so-called stabilization force, who's contributing troops to it, right? Like you hear Indonesia, you hear Azerbaijan, you hear Turkey, but maybe Israel will not allow Turkey. But A, how's it going to form? B, what are the rules of engagement going to be? Is it to take directly on Hamas? Is it to be a policing force? Can it respond to Israeli fire if the Israelis fire? So there are all these, how would it deploy? Where would it deploy? When would it deploy? So there are questions that highlight this gap between the reality and the vision of this plan.
And this international security force, what exactly is its role supposed to be?
To police and stabilize Gaza and ensure the decommissioning of weapons, basically.
But it's unclear who's going to actually be in it at this point.
It's unclear who's going to be in it. We hear reports that it's, right now Indonesia and Azerbaijan is a very close ally of Israel, by the way, is going to contribute troops to it. But the rules of engagement, can it fire at Palestinian fighters? Can it fire at Israel? We don't know these things. But this is de facto, this is going to be the security force of Gaza. And it's part of this internationalization project to turn Gaza from a Palestinian enclave to a globally administered area.
So those seem like pretty important details to figure out. When you zoom out, I mean, this whole thing looks pretty strange from a conflict resolution standpoint. International law recognizes a people's right to arm resistance against colonial domination and foreign occupation. So, what does it mean then that this resolution not only ignores that principle, but also creates a framework with zero accountability for Israel?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the Trump's plan, which the resolution endorses and actually include the text of Trump's plan, it says the first line says that Gaza would be de-radicalized.
Mm-hmm.
Gaza was just the victim of one of the worst atrocities of the century, one of the worst atrocities since World War II. A campaign that Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International and the UN Commission of Inquiry and Israel's own B'Tselem and countless rights groups and rights experts have said is a genocide, an effort to destroy the Palestinian people. And here comes the resolution saying, these people have been killed and displaced and maimed and had a campaign to wipe them out of existence. They're the ones who need to be de-radicalized, right? That for the Palestinians to maybe someday could be maybe perhaps 20 qualifiers, have self-determination. First, the Gaza reconstruction plan needs to work. And second, the PA needs to reform. So all of the burden, all of the things that need to be done, they must be done by the Palestinians. They must reform, they must de-radicalize, they must disarm. Whereas the country whose prime minister is currently an indicted suspected war criminal and a fugitive from the International Criminal Court for using starvation as a weapon of war. And that's just the tip of the iceberg in terms of the horrific Israeli abuses that have been documented by Israeli soldiers themselves. That country, nothing is asked of it. Israel is obliged to allow aid into Gaza. But we saw the weaponization of aid turn into a bargaining chip, right? Israel is obliged under international law not to commit genocide. Not only under international law, under the Genocide Convention, but there was a ruling, actually there were 3 rulings by the International Court of Justice telling Israel to actively take measure to honor its commitments under the Genocide Convention. In fact, legal scholars would say not only that Israel has a responsibility not to commit genocide, the entire world, every state in the world has a legal obligation to prevent genocide. But instead, Israel's so-called concessions in this plan, just stopping the war and allowing the aid, which we know they haven't even stopped that war and they haven't actually allowed the aid. They're seen as, something that Israel gave up. No, it's not. It's something that Israel should have given up. That's something that Israel should have never done in the first place. The Israeli withdrawal. Gaza is Palestinian territory. This has been reaffirmed by multiple UN Security Council resolution, countless UN General Assembly resolutions, an advisory opinion by the ICJ last year. Gaza is Palestinian territory. It's part of Palestine, which is a non-voting, observing member of the United Nations. So when Israel withdraws gradually, when Israel is there to begin with, it's in violation of international law.
More with Ali after the break. So, Ali, where does this resolution then leave the traditional legal understanding of Palestinian self-determination?
Basically, in a way, it nukes it politically, right? The reference in this resolution to a Palestinian state is just so vague and conditional. And I will read you what it says exactly. It says, after the PA, being the Palestinian Authority, reform program is faithfully carried out, not just carried out, faithfully carried out, and Gaza development has advanced, the conditions may, again, underscore, highlight, may, not would, not will, may finally be in place for a credible pathway to Palestinian self-determination and statehood. Not to a Palestinian state, to a pathway to a Palestinian state. So it's like layers and layers and layers of conditions that the Palestinians have to meet. So could be maybe they have a pathway to a state.
Mhm.
It clearly does not prioritize Palestinian self-determination. But again, Natasha, Palestinians' right to self-determination is enshrined by the UN Charter, is enshrined by UN Security Council's resolutions, is enshrined by the geopolitical reality on the ground. Palestinians are not going to go away because of this resolution. The Palestinian push for self-determination, for statehood, is not going to go away. But clearly, from a political perspective, Trump is saying in his plan that the focus here is not for the Palestinians to have a state, is not for the Palestinians to have rights. But this goes back to the roots of the problems that we're dealing with here, right? Like, why is there a war in Gaza? It's because of 75 years of dispossession, of occupation, of apartheid. So as long as these material conditions don't change, a lot of experts, a lot of human rights campaigners are saying this is not sustainable. This wasn't sustainable, and it remains unsustainable.
So why is the Security Council endorsing something that's so outside of this established framework? I mean, are they kind of shooting themselves in the foot here?
Natasha, before this resolution, before the quote-unquote ceasefire came into effect, the situation in Gaza was so horrific. Israel was going into Gaza City, having destroyed completely, when I say destroyed, as in they haven't left anything standing. Khan Yunis in the south, Rafah in the south, Jabalia in the north of the enclave. They were going into Gaza City, the largest Palestinian city in the world, to destroy what's left of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
They were starving Palestinians. The UN monitor had certified that there's a famine in northern Gaza. Israel was not very secretive about its plans to drive Palestinians out of Gaza completely. Ethnically cleansing Gaza was being talked about openly.
Right, and they had development plans for Gaza.
Yeah, absolutely. So it seems like, given the horrors that we're witnessing, the world has come to say the only force that can stop Israel is the United States. And this is what we're working with. It's sort of an acceptance of a bitter reality. And it's almost as if the United States and Israel have leveraged the genocide as almost like a negotiating tactic. You agree to this final proposal, and if you don't, the alternative is the continuing genocide that was, by the way, intensifying in the final weeks of the hot conflict.
Right. I mean, and even UN experts said that the resolution contradicts international law, yet the system's power dynamics made states comply anyway, right?
Yeah. I mean, Francesca Albanese, the UN rapporteur, I'm paraphrasing here, she said of the Board of Peace that replacing one occupying power or one foreign ruled power with another just doesn't solve the issue, and reasserted sort of the commitment to Palestinian sovereignty and Palestinian statehood and self-determination, which is not mentioned in this resolution. Well, it's mentioned with all these conditions and caveats.
Ali, as we start to wrap up here, on the most basic level, how can you implement a security resolution peace plan when the violence has continued, when Israel has continued, escalating violence in the region?
I mean, you keep seeing headline that Israel killed 25 Palestinians testing the ceasefire. Mm-hmm. At what point do we say that no, they're no longer testing the ceasefire? The ceasefire is de facto gone. And Natasha, last week, I was talking to the director of B'Tselem, the Israeli human rights group, and she told me something that stuck with me. She said, the conditions that led to the genocide in Gaza, demographic engineering, the apartheid, the impunity for abuses, the systemic dehumanization of Palestinians, these things have not been addressed. Not only have they not been addressed, they've been further enhanced by the events of the past 2 years. And she said, we haven't seen the worst, that the worst is yet to come. And this is the fear that many people have in the region and across the world.